with me some symbols of my sustainability, my plastic water bottle. They won't let me bring my metal one on the plane. And of course, the airline flight that I took to get here was, of course, a real boon for the environment. But hopefully the net benefit of my being here will be positive. That is, if enough of you go home and turn things off or cut down a little bit, maybe will sort of compensate a little. So I made a lot of references to the awful things that I'm about to tell you about the state of the world. And I imagine some of you are thinking, oh God, what's she going to say? Actually, it's sort of interesting to me. Americans have this real tendency to sort of divide things into really strong dual categories. So, on one hand, I call it the distinction between Klingons and Cylons. If any of your science fiction fans, on the one hand, you've got Star Trek, and in Star Trek, all problems except Klingons and Romulans have been conquered. We don't have hunger or poverty or any of those things, except maybe on some far distant planets we just have to come help out of their little situation. And basically, we don't have any major problems other than aliens. And that's one vision. That's, I think, the sort of technological paradise vision of our world that a lot of us, I think, are get really invested in. This idea that all we have to do is sort of tweak things a little, do renewables here, some solar thermal here, just take advantage of all the power the sun gets out, and then all of a sudden we'll move into paradise, where we've achieved this sort of ecological status quo. We don't have to give anything up. The economy can keep growing. We can fulfill ourselves and turn into Captain Kirk. This is a very nice fantasy. I don't think it's real realistic. The other option we have is sort of the Cylon model, Battlestar Galactica, where, the evil robots have come, and you can pick whatever it is, the climate change or peak oil, or, the zombies have come with their Uzis and they're taking people out, whatever. And that the world has just reached, you've hit apocalypse. It's universal apocalypse. Everybody's experiencing it. We're down to, a few thousand people escaping in a ship away from the evil Cylons, and they're slowly picking us off, and we're down to essentially the end of the world. There's nothing left. And I think it's a really dangerous habit that most of us often feel like we have to pick between those choices. And if we can't achieve this sort of happy, perfect ending, then that means, oh my God, the world is ending. We might as well all be dead. My suggestion is that we're probably not going to have the Star Trek industrial paradise come up, and maybe that's even a good thing. We're facing some really serious situations. We are facing, I think, an inevitable 2-degree plus climate change in climate. At this point, the odds are getting lower and lower and lower that we're actually going to prevent the tipping points that will push us past into sort of irreversible and potentially very serious climate change. It's still technically possible we could do it, but some of the best studies that we have now suggest that the amount of industrial emissions that we would have to cut in order to prevent hitting 2 degrees is 100%. That's everything. And soon. We have a decade, maybe less, to do that. And I don't think anybody realistically thinks, no matter how hard we work, no matter how excited and hopeful and passionate we are, that we're probably going to achieve this. I mean, I'm not saying it's absolutely, sort of saying it's important to be blunt about what a serious situation we are. The best estimates suggest that if we were to make a renewable energy economy shift, if we were going to try to shift our economy over, that it would take about 20 years before peak oil. There's something called the Hirsch Report that was commissioned by the Department of Energy that suggested that it would take about 20 years to make a smooth transition over to oil. Well, even fairly optimistic predictions like the U.S. Geological Survey suggest that we will be facing peak oil in the early 2020s, which is considerably less than 20 years from now. And it may well be that we're at or right around the oil peak. So we are facing problems that, as John put it, are as serious as anything that's ever faced human beings. That said, however, I think the immediate leap to we're all doomed or somebody else will fix it for us is a really bad idea. And this sort of gets me to my main topic, is when I found out that this panel was on sustainable lifestyles. I thought, great. But the first thing I want to do is, my worry about the idea of sustainable lifestyles is that that attracts a few people who are really committed to it, and then a lot of people who sort of say, well, but, the compost, the plastic bag, they don't really matter that much. And you hear that a lot from environmentalists. You hear that from a lot of people, actually, that, it's sort of the same problem we all have with voting, unless you live in a swing state now. It's like, does it really matter if I vote? Does it really matter if I make these changes? Well, if we're going to have climate change anyway, if we're going to have, all of these issues anyway, does it really, really matter? And so I thought maybe the first thing that I would do is sort of talk about the myths that I think that go with sustainable lifestyle, that sort of prevent us maybe from going forward with changing our lives. And the first one, I think, is that these things don't matter very much. Yes, it's true. If you take your food scraps every night and you go sneaking out to your compost pile in the dark, behind closed doors to your compost pile, the fact that you didn't throw those in the landfill will not matter very much in the great scheme of things. It is true that one person. On the other hand, how do you get more and more people to keep their food scraps, which, when you put them into landfills, produce methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas? How do you get more and more people to do that? Well, one of the ways you do it is by setting up your compost pile somewhere where other people can see it, instead of putting it in the ugly corner of your yard, and then you carry it out those food scraps in daylight. Maybe even get a bumper sticker that says "compost happens" or something like that. And this is very little, but the point is, it's very easy to think that nothing we do matters very much. And in the very great scheme of 6.8 billion people, it's true. At the same time, the social impact of the way we act, of the way we move each other forward is really enormous. We tend not to realize, for example, there's this tendency, one of the myths that I think is most important is this is somebody else's responsibility. Fixing the planet is somebody else's responsibility. And I think this is probably something we all would really like to be true. I really would like it to be not me who is responsible for global warming, if only because I'm going to have to face my kids someday. I really would like to, it's very tempting, being something of a person of the left, for me to say, well, it's evil corporations and corporate power that's caused us to use all this energy. And that would be true, except, here I am railing against the power of industrial agriculture and stuff. And then I have to ask, well, who gives Altria, which is related to which used to be Philip Morris Corporations, and which also owns Kraft, and which has one of the largest shares in the industrial food system. Who is it who gives them their money? Now let me see, do they get it from the government? No, mostly they get it from people who go to the store and buy their food. And then they take that money and use it to lobby Congress for farm bill policies that then, affect industrial agriculture. So to some degree, it's not a perfect system. They certainly have more power than just their money. But to some degree, the problem comes back to me. And of course, you hear that from corporations all the time, where they say, oh, well, we're just asking for what the customer wants, And if you get to this point, well, we say it's the evil corporations, they say it's the customer, whose fault is all of this? And the problem is there's plenty of responsibility to go around.